and welcome to Drummers Review. I'm Nolly and today we're looking at a VK Drums Ageless Collection Sterling Silver snare drum. If you haven't heard of VK Drums before, they're a small boutique builder here in the UK. They're based out of Sheffield, which is a city synonymous with metalworking. And here they're branching out of the traditional metals used in drum manufacture into precious metals. This drum is made from 925 sterling silver and it's definitely aimed at the collectors. It's got an eye-watering £5,000 price tag. This drum is 14 by 4.5 inches deep. It's got a 1.5mm sterling silver shell. It's got single flange stainless steel hoops and uses claws to connect those to the shell. So let's take a deeper listen at how this drum sounds in a few different tunings. The first impressions of this drum, if anything, are a little bit intimidating. It even comes with its own set of jeweler's gloves so that you can handle it without tarnishing the shell. But it's a really visually striking bit of kit, although you are immediately aware that you're holding a really expensive snare drum. The snare arrived with a Remo coated ambassador on the top and a Remo hazy ambassador on the Reso side. It also has Pure Sound Custom Pro 20-strand wires. To be honest, this drum was quite difficult to tune. The lugs feel very stiff and almost gritty as you operate them. It's a bit of a shame, given the cost of this drum, but it definitely took me a while to get it completely in tune, and even in the end I felt like it was kind of impossible to get the tuning absolutely nailed. So I don't know if there's something perhaps with the hoops or with the bearing edge there. However, when we got it to a decent spot, it did have a really good sound, and in particular there's this kind of overtone that VK drums have, which immediately was present in this drum too. We thought this drum sounded particularly good in the lower and mid tunings, because it did seem to choke just a little bit once we started to crank it higher. Perhaps that kind of lack of body is something to do with the shallower depth of drum, but whatever it was, it definitely sang in that lower and mid-tuning range. I found that it had this lovely pure overtone ring to it that I haven't found in that many other snare drums. It's not clear to me whether that is to do with the shell itself, maybe it's the silver, but I think more likely it's got something to do with those very heavy stainless steel hoops. We also found that the snare was very responsive, especially at those lower dynamic levels. And additionally, the cross-stick sound was very clear and precise. With the snare wires off, we also thought it had a particularly timbali-esque character. Those rim shots are absolutely cutting. I think it's pretty easy to say that this is not going to be the kind of drum you're going to see down at the pub. It's probably going to end up in the hands of serious collectors or perhaps studio owners. It's the kind of drum that's going to look really great in a display case, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them don't end up getting hit that much in their lifetimes. This drum is very well presented. It's got a very cool look to it. It's kind of somewhere between precious and industrial. The build quality looks really great, although there are just a couple of spots which unfortunately do also affect the performance of the drum that we were not too pleased to see. One of those is the slots that the snare straps pass through on their way to the snare bed. Those have a particularly sharp edge, and I know that that can lead to the straps eventually getting frayed and actually breaking off completely with time. The custom-made snare strainer design that VK use looks really great. It's got a smooth mechanism, and a neat touch is that it comes with VK Drums' own V key, which is a drum key that slots into there, so you've always got your key there with you. However, it does present a few design problems to us. The first of those issues for me comes down to when you insert the key, especially if you push it a bit too far, it actually exerts pressure onto the snare straps. And that can mean that as you loosen the wires using the throw-off, it actually goes past a certain point and starts to exert pressure back onto the wires. Which is obviously a bit counterproductive. Also, the mechanism itself has to travel a really long distance before the snares are actually completely disengaged. And we found that caught us out a couple of times where we thought we'd done so, yet trying to play with the snare wires off, you actually still got a little bit of buzzing from the wires because they were still just touching. It seems to me the throw-off just doesn't need to have a travel that long. In fact, it would be better suited to being something that could be very quickly operated to be on or off again. And finally, I thought that the tensioning knob, which has very deep notches in, I guess the idea there being that you could find your perfect setting and have it never move again. I found that quite difficult to operate because what would tend to happen is you'd have to pull up a lot to turn the knob, and that's just not very intuitive, especially if you're trying to make a quick adjustment on the fly. Aside from these few little problems with the strainer, it's clear that the hardware is made to the highest quality. It's all very heavy duty, and it is really nice to see a manufacturer going out and actually creating all bespoke hardware for their drums. Additionally, the laser etched logo and the hallmarks on the front of the shell are a really classy touch that absolutely befits a snare drum of this collectability. A neat little touch that comes with this drum is the inclusion of a custom-made Hardcase snare drum case. It's got a cool marble effect finish and also a riveted on stainless steel VK logo plate. Overall, I'd say this snare drum definitely achieves the goal of being a collector's item. There's only going to be 47 of them made, which corresponds to the atomic number of silver. And on top of that, it is a really great sounding drum too. Seeing as this drum is made from sterling silver, I guess the price is quite appropriate. It's definitely a lot of money to spend on a snare drum though, but if you're a collector, it could actually be a worthy investment. I think my favorite thing with this drum would actually be the fact that while it's a really cool looking snare, and it's obviously very collectible, it actually sounds really good too, especially in that lower to mid-range tuning. But on the other hand, I think for a drum that's this expensive, it's a bit of a shame that it didn't tune up more easily. I do think that strainer is a bit fiddly, and certainly I'd like to see the grooves for the snare straps to be smoothed out, just so you don't end up with your snares falling off entirely. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Definitely subscribe if you'd like to see further reviews, and I'll see you next time at Drummer's Review.